I want to circle back to the sticky hands, sticky feet. Can you describe that drill for people that are curious?
Oh man, yeah, because I cannot stress enough. Like, I love this drill. I think everyone should do it. Okay, usually when I'm teaching this to a student, I would preface it by saying, okay, when you readjust on a hold with your hands and feet, so maybe like you grab the hold, but you're not in the best spot, so you just shuffle around and get a better position, or you put your foot down and you know it's not in the best place, so you slide it around so you get the spot you wanted. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and a lot of the time you might need to do it. But I strongly suspect that if everyone was as aware of how often they did it as they could be, they would do it a lot less. Because essentially, if you grab a hold badly and then have to use energy to grab it again, you're basically doing reps when you could just do one rep. And why would you want to do more than one rep if you're trying to be as efficient as possible? So we play a really, really fun game with students where step one, I'll demonstrate it first. I'll climb something relatively easy and I'll add in a few like, oh, I readjusted my hand or I readjusted my foot there, and I just get them to spot it. So that we're both aware of like, okay, this is what counts as a readjustment. Great, you can see it as well. You're starting to understand what I'm talking about. Okay, now you have a go. And it feels really mean at first, but basically every time they make even the tiniest readjustment, I'll go, oh, nope, did you notice you did it again? Let's try again. It's a frustrating 3 or 4 minutes, especially for more experienced climbers who really have this as like an ingrained habit, because they're less aware that they're doing it. So usually it will take a few minutes of me pointing it out and going, you just did it just there, yeah, left foot, did you notice? Okay, start again. And then usually after a few minutes we get to a point where they're climbing it again, they readjust, and before I say anything they'll go, oh damn it, I just readjusted my right foot, oh damn, okay, I'll start again. And at that point I'm like, brilliant, you have now built awareness of readjustments, well done you're noticing when you're doing it. So now let's play this really simple game, and this is what I'd recommend you do at home, folks. Well, not at home, at your local climbing gym. Pick a medium grade climb. Once you're really aware of the readjustments you're making, pick a medium grade climb where you look at it going, I can climb that, but the idea of having to keep my hands and feet still and not being allowed to shuffle, that sounds really, really difficult. That's the right level of difficulty for this exercise. You pick a climb, you climb it once, even if it's going terribly, still keep going. Just keep a running total of counting how many times you readjust. And then by the time you get to the top, you're like, cool, I did it. I readjusted 5 times though. And then obviously you repeat the climb again, you try and do less than 5 readjustments. Fairly simple game, but for me, yeah, the knock-on effects I get from it are really, really helpful. After a while, whereas initially your habit might be to just readjust on every hand and foot hold even when you didn't need to, eventually you retrain that habit so that by default, you don't expect to ever be able to readjust, and so you grab everything much more precisely than you were previously. Having that level of precision saves you a huge amount of energy, but it also gives you a lot of confidence to know, I practice precision all the time. When I'm going for like a hard shot to a really, really small blocked hold, I'm not that worried about whether I'm going to miss it because I warm up practicing this drill all the time. The other really useful benefit that I get from it, which I cannot overstate enough, is a really, really helpful one for people. Very, very often when you're playing this game, you will grab the wrong part of a handhold, or you'll put your foot down on a hold where you're like, oh man, that is not where I meant to put it. There's a really good bit of the hold over there, and I put my foot down in this crap spot. If you make yourself try it anyway and just try and push through that move, you start practicing this really, really useful skill in climbing, which is, even if it doesn't feel comfortable, it might work anyway, just make yourself do it, which otherwise isn't really a skill you get to practice. And for me, the idea of, I put my foot down in the wrong place, it doesn't feel right, but I'm just going to try and make myself do it anyway, that is actually a really, really similar thought process to, I've put my foot down perfectly on a hold, which is much worse than I wanted it to be. It doesn't feel right at all, but I guess there's nothing for it but to push through and see if it works anyway. Pushing through uncomfortable feeling positions like that, I've found is like a really useful thing to practice, because the number of times I've just not gone for a move because I thought like, no, this can't be it. Like that, this sloper feels unusable. This foothold feels completely impossible. There must be another way of doing it. And then eventually I've just gone, okay, I'm just going to try it, even though it feels unlikely. And then discovered, it works fine. I just didn't realize that I would be able to get through that level of discomfort on a move. And now I know that I can push through that level of discomfort. Now I can do that every time.
What skill drills do you find yourself repeatedly recommending to maybe like moderately experienced climbers? Not total beginners necessarily, but people that are decent climbers.
One of the ones that I think can often come across as I have to explain it carefully because it otherwise seems like a patronizingly basic drill to teach to intermediate climbers, but improving body awareness. If I was talking about it really briefly, I'd describe it as, you know how sometimes beginners climb with like their arms bent the whole time, and ideally you'd want them to climb with nice straight arms. a version of that, I think, can be really, really appropriate for more intermediate or advanced climbers. Because, yeah, I agree, if you're on a slightly overhanging wall and you're on a really, really good hold and you're keeping blocks off for no reason, then yes, you are burning strength. That's not an efficient position. But I think the way I was taught it when I was younger, which is good climbing technique, is arms straight, twisted into the wall. This is good climbing technique, and square on, arms locked into the wall is bad climbing technique. I don't think that quite fits. I think climbing is too varied for that to be true. Step one, just getting them to be like more aware of the strength they're using. We're all guilty of doing this accidentally. That when we warm up, we're at climbs that take, okay, if you climb V7 or so, you're probably going to warm up on a V1. There is no move on that V1 that would take more than 10% of your total strength. So you put in more strength than you need to on every move, and you don't really notice any of the subtleties on any of the move because you don't need to. So I found there was like a lot of scope for learning on the easier climbs if I slow down and pay a bit more attention to them. Because I think we all also get to a point now climbing where we're like, oh, I've climbed for a while. The V1s and the V2s, they just don't challenge me anymore. There's nothing I can really learn on those. The climbs that challenge me, that's what teaches me stuff. So I want to just race through my warm-up, get onto the hard stuff. That's where I'll learn things. And now I've realized, actually, no, by being too strong and going too fast, we're just missing loads of learning opportunities. So step one, get onto an easy climb and just give a running commentary of what you're noticing. So start talking about like, I now notice that I'm squeezing this hold really, really tightly, or I'm keeping a lot of tension in my arm, in my shoulder, my core, my legs, whatever it might be. So literally just getting them to describe what they're noticing. Really, really, really helpful. And sometimes people will immediately go like, oh, I did not realize that I was like crushing the holds into powder when I could have just been holding them as loosely as I need to stay on the wall. So first, just giving people that awareness of like, oh, did you notice the various types of strength you're using there? That's a really nice, interesting place to start. Then ask them to do it again and just experiment a little bit with, okay, come up with 2 different options for each move. And I'll kind of warn them in advance saying there isn't a correct answer you're looking for, because kind of as we said, there isn't a correct way of climbing. If I keep my arm straight and I lean back from the wall and I do it like a nice drop knee move, that's great because I save strength in my arm, but that's at the expense of I've now put more weight into my handhold. Conversely, I could also choose to come really close to the wall, and supposedly that's not a good position to be in because I've used more strength in my arms. But now I'm here, I've got loads more weight over my feet, I've got a lot less weight into the hands. So I kind of understand it nowadays as when we climb, we're just choosing to make various compromises of different types of strength. Now when I warm up on easy climbs, my aim is to actually think through and understand the different compromises I'm making. So when I talk about it with students, I'll go, okay, look, on this V1, you can do a drop knee, and you could do it with your feet there, or there, or there, or over there. They're all just different versions of the drop knee, but they'll all feel subtly different and have slightly different benefits. None of them matter now, because you could do this V1 however you liked. But on a harder climb later, there might be a fair bit of choice as to how you do a move, and if you already understand all of these compromises, you've got a much better shot of picking the easiest move for yourself. So I find a lot of benefit in just slowing right down on easier climbs, really paying attention to exactly the compromises we're making with strength, and just experimenting a little bit more on easier climbs. Benefits for me have been that initially I just like widen my movement vocabulary. I think most of us are strong enough that we can climb basically any V1 like a ladder with our feet just smearing against the wall and learn nothing. Or I can like intentionally be creative, experiment with different options on each move. None of them are necessary, but I might be practicing things that come up later in my session or later in my climbing. So widening my movement vocabulary, really, really helpful. Second one, which I found to be a really good benefit, slow payoff, but after a lot of practice, you get to the point that you instinctively use the minimum amount of strength rather than instinctively just ripping everything off the wall as you go. So that's really, really helpful. And then the last one for me, and then I'll shut up because I've been babbling away about this drill for a while. The last one that I find really, really beneficial is, as I said earlier, once you get to a certain point in your climbing, you might start thinking that the V0s and the V1s, stuff like that, just aren't as exciting or interesting anymore. If you really slow down and you get onto the climbs with this drill and you look at them through this lens where you're like, no, I'm wanting to experiment and to understand movement a little bit more, suddenly all those V0s and V1s are fascinating. But only if you get into it, because sometimes I'll explain this drill to people and they're like, okay, I'm climbing the jug ladder slowly. Is that endurance training? I'm like, okay, no, you pay more attention and you'll learn more from it. The last one, because we talked about precision, we talked about the body awareness drill, dynamic movement, and improving a confident use of momentum. I would passionately say is good for all climbers, not just people who want to do parkour competition style boulders. Dynamic movement is used in all disciplines of climbing. It's just not as overtly obvious as when you see someone do a running jump paddle dono. So a lot of the time I find myself practicing sometimes really basic momentum skills. Sometimes people are genuinely good at it, but they just have really low confidence, which then ends up that they actually just perform at a really low level. So a lot of the time we do some practice with the aim of building confidence. Sometimes we do it with the aim of actually improving their understanding of how to use momentum. But for a lot of people, practicing using momentum is a really, really good one to have a look at. I guess in general, my main advice for people would be think about what you like doing the least and think about what you think you're the worst at and start hammering that, because that's by far the easiest way to improve. It takes the least amount of practice to improve because you're already bad at it, and you're probably avoiding doing it loads. And actually, even if it doesn't seem related to the stuff you're genuinely really passionate about, like some people I'm sure would say, like, I'm into trad climbing. I cannot imagine how practicing momentum is ever really going to be that relevant to hard, sketchy outdoor trad climbs. Over and over again, I've noticed I practice a weak area, which I don't think is ever going to be relevant to me, and then it has knock-on effects for the specific area that I'm really, really interested in and much more focused on.